Brandon Cole stepped into the boarding lounge of the Celestial Dream with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. His custom suit probably cost more than most people earned in 3 months, and he wanted everyone to know it. The spacecraft lounge gleamed with polished metal and soft lighting, but Brandon barely noticed, because he was too busy checking his messages and ignoring everyone around him. The Celestial Dream was one of the finest passenger vessels traveling between Earth and Mars, and Brandon had booked the most expensive suite available. He was heading to Mars for a business deal that would make him even wealthier than he already was. His quantum computing company had just landed a massive contract with the colonial government, and this trip was supposed to be a victory lap. Near the large viewing windows, a woman in a gray cleaning uniform was wiping down the seats in the waiting area. She moved quietly and efficiently, and most passengers looked right through her as if she did not exist. Brandon glanced at her once and dismissed her just as quickly. His assistant, Greg Palmer, was walking beside him trying to confirm the meeting schedule, but Brandon waved him off. The woman in the cleaning uniform was Maya Johnson, though nobody in the lounge knew her name or cared to ask. She had deep brown skin and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her movements were precise and careful as she cleaned each seat. There was something about the way she carried herself that suggested discipline and training, but the uniform made her invisible to people like Brandon. Brandon walked past her toward the premium boarding area when the entire station suddenly shook. A low rumble vibrated through the floor, and several passengers stumbled. Brandon lurched forward, and his expensive coffee splashed out of its container and down the front of his suit. The dark liquid spread across the pale fabric, and Brandon's face turned red with anger. He spun around looking for someone to blame, and his eyes landed on Maya, who was steadying herself against a seat. She had not caused the turbulence, but she was the nearest service worker, and that was enough for Brandon. "Do you people not warn passengers about these things?" he snapped at her. "This suit costs more than you make in a year." Maya looked at him calmly and said nothing. She reached for a cleaning cloth from her supply cart, but Brandon held up his hand. "Forget it," he said dismissively. "Just stay out of my way, sir. That was a scheduled thruster test," Greg said quietly. "They announced it 10 minutes ago." Brandon ignored him and stormed toward the bathroom to clean himself up. Other passengers looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. Maya went back to her work as if nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, the passengers were settling into their seats when an announcement came over the speakers. The flight crew regretted to inform everyone that there would be a short delay. The primary pilot had fallen ill, and they were waiting for the backup pilot to arrive from another part of the station. Brandon groaned loudly from his seat in the first-class cabin. He had important meetings and could not afford delays. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up even though the crew had asked everyone to remain seated. "This is unacceptable," he announced, to nobody in particular. "I paid premium prices for this flight, and they cannot even get a pilot here on time." Greg shifted uncomfortably in the seat beside him. "Sir, maybe we should just wait quietly. They are doing their best." "Their best is not good enough," Brandon said. He looked around the cabin as if searching for someone else to complain to. Through the doorway, he could see into the main passenger area where Maya was now sitting in a crew jump seat. She had finished her cleaning duties and was waiting for departure like everyone else. Brandon pointed at her and laughed. "What is next?" he said loudly. "Are they going to have the cleaning lady fly the plane?" Several passengers looked up. Some frowned. Others looked away. Maya's expression did not change, but her eyes met Brandon's for a moment. Brandon was on a roll now, enjoying his own joke. He walked closer to the doorway so more people could hear him. "Tell you what, sweetheart," he called out to Maya. "If you can fly this ship to Mars, I will marry you right here on the spot." A few people gasped. One woman whispered something to her husband. Greg closed his eyes and shook his head. Maya stood up slowly. She was not tall, but something about the way she moved made her seem larger. She looked directly at Brandon with an expression that was completely neutral and completely calm. She did not say a word. She simply turned and walked toward the crew area at the back of the ship. Brandon chuckled and returned to his seat. "See," he said to Greg. "People need to learn to take a joke." "That was not a joke," Greg said quietly. "That was cruel." "Oh, come on," Brandon said. "These people are paid to serve us. If they cannot handle a little ribbing, maybe they should find other jobs." The announcement came again, apologizing for the delay. The backup pilot was on the way, and they would be departing in 15 minutes. Brandon settled back into his seat and pulled out his tablet. He had already forgotten about Maya and his cruel words. To him, she was nobody important, just part of the background of his life. But in the crew area, Maya sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap. Another crew member asked if she was okay, and Maya nodded. She had heard worse in her 12 years of military service. She had been insulted by people far more dangerous than some wealthy businessman who thought money made him important. Still, his words stung not because they hurt her feelings, but because they reminded her why she had left military life in the first place. She had spent over a decade defending people like Brandon. She had risked her life so that civilians could travel safely between worlds and build their fortunes and live their comfortable lives. And this was how some of them saw people like her. As servants, as jokes, as invisible. The 15 minutes passed slowly. Passengers read or slept or chatted quietly. Brandon reviewed his presentation for the Mars meeting. Greg tried to work but kept glancing at his boss with disapproval. Nobody knew that in less than an hour everything would change. Nobody knew that the comfortable, predictable flight to Mars was about to become something else entirely. And nobody, certainly not Brandon, had any idea who Maya Johnson really was or what she was capable of doing. The ship's engines hummed to life. The crew made their final preparations. And in the jump seat, Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath, preparing herself for whatever came next. The Celestial Dream finally lifted off from the orbital station 20 minutes behind schedule. Brandon was still annoyed about the delay, but he settled into his premium seat and accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. Through the large window beside him, he could see Earth growing smaller as the ship accelerated toward Mars. The journey would take 16 hours, and Brandon planned to sleep through most of it. Greg was working quietly on his laptop beside him. The cabin lights had been dimmed for the evening departure, and most of the first-class passengers were already reclining their seats. Brandon finished his champagne and was about to do the same when he felt the ship shudder slightly. It was not like the thruster test from earlier. This was different. Smaller, but somehow more wrong. Brandon frowned and looked at Greg, who had also noticed. "Did you feel that?" Greg asked. "Probably nothing," Brandon said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. A moment later, the ship shuddered again. This time the lights flickered. Several passengers sat up and looked around. One of the flight attendants picked up the wall phone and spoke quietly into it. Her face went pale. Brandon unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "Excuse me," he called to the attendant. "What is going on?" Before she could answer, the door to the cockpit burst open and a young man in a flight officer uniform rushed out. His name tag read Morris and his face was covered with sweat. He looked terrified. "We need help," he said loudly. "Is there anyone on board with piloting experience?" Anyone at all. The cabin went silent. Passengers looked at each other. Brandon felt his stomach drop. "What happened?" he demanded. "Where is the pilot?" Lieutenant Kyle Morris ran his hand through his hair. There was an accident in the cockpit. Captain Phillips, the backup pilot, had some kind of medical emergency. "We think it was a stroke. He collapsed right after we cleared the station. I have been trying to stabilize the ship, but the autopilot is malfunctioning. Something is wrong with the navigation computer." "Can you fly the ship yourself?" someone asked. Kyle shook his head. "I am a co-pilot. I can handle normal operations, but we are approaching a debris field. Old mining equipment and fragments from a destroyed cargo hauler. The autopilot was supposed to navigate us through it, but without the computer working properly, I need someone with advanced piloting skills. Manual navigation through a debris field requires training I do not have." The passengers began talking all at once. Some people were crying. Others were demanding answers. Brandon felt genuine fear for the first time in years. "How long until we reach the debris field?" Kyle asked. "Less than an hour," Kyle said. "And without a skilled pilot, we could hit something. The shields can handle small impacts, but anything larger could tear through the hull." Brandon's mind was racing. He had played flight simulators. He had even taken a few virtual reality lessons years ago when he was younger. Surely that counted for something. He stepped forward. "I have some flight experience," he announced. Every head in the cabin turned to look at him. Kyle looked desperate enough to consider anything. "What kind of experience?" Kyle asked. "Simulation," Brandon said, trying to sound confident. "I have logged probably 50 hours in advanced flight simulators. Military-grade programs." Kyle hesitated. "Simulation is not the same as actual flying, sir. And definitely not the same as combat navigation through a debris field. But it is better than nothing, right? Brandon said. I mean, if nobody else has any experience. He looked around the cabin waiting for someone to challenge him. Part of him wanted to be the hero. Part of him genuinely thought he could do it. And part of him was terrified but too proud to back down now that he had volunteered. Before Kyle could respond, a voice came from the back of the passenger section. I have flight experience. Everyone turned. Maya Johnson was standing up from her jump seat. She moved into the aisle and walked toward the front of the cabin. Her cleaning uniform seemed out of place among the well-dressed passengers, but her expression was completely calm. Brandon stared at her. Was she serious? The cleaning lady thought she could fly a spacecraft. Kyle looked at her. What kind of experience? He asked carefully. Maya stopped in front of him and met his eyes. Commander Maya Johnson, she said. Earth Defense Fleet retired. 12 years active service. 5,000 hours piloting corvettes, destroyers, and capital ships. Combat certified for debris field navigation, asteroid belt operations, and hostile engagement scenarios. The cabin went completely silent. Kyle's eyes widened. Commander Johnson, he whispered. The Maya Johnson from the Proxima conflict. Maya nodded once. Kyle actually took a step back. I read about you at the academy. You saved the Titan colony. You flew a damaged frigate through an asteroid field while under enemy fire. That was a long time ago, Maya said quietly. Brandon felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. This could not be real. The woman he had mocked, the woman he had called sweetheart and joked about. She was a decorated military commander. Greg leaned close to Brandon and whispered, You should probably sit down now. Wait, Brandon said. If you are really a commander, why are you working as a cleaner? Maya looked at him with those same calm eyes. Because I wanted something quiet after I retired 6 months ago. The uniform helps me blend in. People do not ask questions when you are invisible to them. The words hit Brandon like a punch. He had made her invisible. He had treated her like she was nobody. Kyle was already moving. Commander, we need you in the cockpit right now. Can you help us? Maya nodded. Show me what we are dealing with. As they started toward the cockpit, Maya paused and looked back at Brandon. Your offer earlier, she said, about marriage if I could fly the ship. Brandon's face turned red. I was joking, he stammered. I did not mean, I know what you meant, Maya said. Her voice was not angry, just factual. You meant to humiliate someone you thought was beneath you. She turned and followed Kyle into the cockpit. The door closed behind them. Brandon stood frozen in the aisle. Other passengers were staring at him, some with disgust, some with pity. Greg pulled him back to his seat. You need to apologize to her, Greg said. When this is over, you need to make this right. Brandon could not speak. He felt sick, not just from fear about the debris field, but from shame, pure burning shame. In the cockpit, Maya was strapping into the pilot seat. Kyle was explaining the damage to the navigation computer and showing her the readings from the debris field ahead. Maya listened carefully, asking questions and studying the controls. How bad is the field? Kyle asked. Dense, Maya said. Lots of large fragments. We will have to fly manual the whole way through. No autopilot, no computer assistance. Just eyes and instinct. Can you do it? Kyle asked. Maya's hands moved over the controls, checking systems and bringing up visual displays. I have done worse, she said. But everyone needs to stay in their seats and buckled in. This is going to be rough. Kyle returned to the passenger cabin and made the announcement. Everyone needed to secure all loose items and remain seated with seatbelts fastened. They were about to enter the debris field and the ship would be making evasive maneuvers. Brandon buckled his seatbelt with shaking hands. Through the window, he could see the first pieces of debris appearing. Small fragments that looked like distant stars but were actually chunks of metal and rock tumbling through space. In the cockpit, Maya took a deep breath. Her hands were steady on the controls. She had not flown in 6 months, had not sat in a pilot seat since her retirement. But her training was still there. The muscle memory, the focus. The first large piece of debris appeared on the scanners. Maya adjusted course smoothly. The ship banked to the left and passengers gasped as they felt the movement. Here we go, Maya said quietly to herself. The celestial dream entered the debris field and the real test began. Maya's eyes moved across the control panel with the speed and precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The debris field stretched ahead of them like a minefield in space with chunks of metal and rock, ranging from the size of a fist to pieces as large as small buildings. Each one was tumbling through the void at different speeds and trajectories. The navigation computer would have calculated safe paths through all of it, but now that system was dead and useless. Kyle sat in the co-pilot seat monitoring the shield's strength and power distribution. He had trained for emergency situations, but nothing like this. He kept glancing at Maya, watching the way her hands moved over the controls. There was no hesitation, no fear. Just complete focus, first contact in 30 seconds, Maya said calmly. Large fragment approaching from the starboard side. I am adjusting course 5 degrees port. The ship tilted smoothly to the left. Through the cockpit window they could see a massive twisted piece of metal drift past. It had probably been part of a cargo container once, but now it was just wreckage spinning slowly through space. It missed them by less than 50 meters. In the passenger cabin, people gripped their armrests. Some had their eyes closed. Others stared out the windows, watching the debris stream past. Brandon sat rigid in his seat. His knuckles were white from holding the armrests so tight. Beside him, Greg was quietly praying. Maya's voice came over the intercom. "This is Commander Johnson speaking from the cockpit. We have entered the debris field and I will be piloting us through manually. You will feel the ship moving as I make evasive maneuvers. This is normal. Stay in your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. We will be through this in approximately 45 minutes. Her voice was steady and confident. Several passengers visibly relaxed just hearing that tone. It was the voice of someone in control, someone who knew what they were doing. Brandon closed his eyes and listened to that voice. The same woman he had mocked was now the only thing standing between everyone on this ship and death. The irony was almost too much to bear. In the cockpit, Maya was already dealing with the next obstacle. 3 pieces of debris were converging from different angles. She calculated the trajectories in her head and adjusted the ship's course threading between them. The Celestial Dream rolled to the right, then dipped down. Passengers felt their stomachs lurch. "Shield impact," Kyle called out. Small fragments struck the aft section, shields holding at 92%. "Keep monitoring them," Maya said. "If we drop below 70%, let me know immediately." The debris was getting thicker now. Maya had to make constant adjustments. Her hands never stopped moving. Roll right, pitch down, increase speed, decrease speed. Every decision had to be perfect because there was no margin for error. She fell into the rhythm of it. This was what she had been trained for. In the military, she had flown through worse. She had piloted ships through combat zones where the debris was not just random junk, but active weapons fire. Compared to that, this was just a very difficult navigation exercise. But it had been 6 months since she had flown. 6 months since she had felt the controls under her hands. Part of her had wondered if she would ever want to do this again after everything she had seen in the war. The trauma, the losses, the friends who had not made it home. Now sitting in the pilot seat with 100 lives depending on her, she felt something she had not felt in months. Purpose. Another large fragment appeared ahead. This one was huge. Part of an old mining ship, maybe. It was tumbling end over end directly in their path. Maya's eyes narrowed. She ran the calculations. There was no way to go around it in time. "Hold on," she said into the intercom. She pushed the controls forward and the ship dropped into a steep dive. Passengers screamed. Some loose items that had not been properly secured went flying. Brandon felt his stomach rise into his throat. The fragment passed over them so close that its shadow fell across the cockpit window. Maya pulled the ship back up as soon as they cleared it. Her movements were smooth, but the maneuver had been aggressive. Necessary but aggressive. Kyle checked the readings. "Shields at 89%. That was close, Commander, I know," Maya said. "More debris ahead." A cluster of smaller fragments like a swarm. Maya increased speed and wove through them. The ship moved like a dancer. Left, right, up, down. Each movement precise and controlled. In the passenger cabin, a child started crying. Her mother held her close and whispered that everything would be okay. An elderly man was reciting prayers. A young couple held hands so tight their fingers were losing color. Brandon opened his eyes and looked out the window. He could see the debris rushing past. Some pieces were so close he could make out details, scorch marks, serial numbers, evidence of the disaster that had created this field. He thought about what Maya had said, that he had tried to humiliate someone he thought was beneath him. She was right. That was exactly what he had done. Not just to her, but to countless other people throughout his life. Service workers, assistants, anyone he considered less important than himself. And now one of those people was saving his life. In the cockpit, Maya was dealing with the worst section of the field. The fragments here were packed so densely that there was barely any clear space. She had to make split-second decisions constantly. Her training took over completely. She was not thinking anymore. She was just reacting, reading the debris, feeling the ship, becoming one with the controls. Kyle watched in awe. He had never seen anyone fly like this. The way she anticipated every obstacle. The way she seemed to know where each piece of debris would be before the scanner showed it. This was mastery. Major fragment ahead, Kyle called out. Biggest one yet. It is directly in our path and I do not see a way around it. Maya saw it too. A massive twisted section of hull plating tumbling toward them. It was easily the size of a small building. If they hit it, the shields would fail instantly and the ship would be torn apart. She studied the fragment, calculating its rotation. There was a gap. A narrow space between two twisted sections of metal. If she could time it right, they could fly through, but the gap was barely wider than the Celestial Dream. And it was rotating. She would have to match the rotation and thread through at exactly the right moment. Kyle saw what she was planning. Commander, that gap is too narrow. We should try to go around. No time, Maya said. We hit it or we thread it. I am threading it. She adjusted their approach angle. Her eyes never left the fragment. She watched it rotate once, twice, learning its rhythm, finding the pattern. Now, she whispered. The ship rolled 90 degrees to the side and accelerated. Passengers screamed as they tilted sideways. Everything that was not bolted down slid to one side. Brandon slammed against his window. The Celestial Dream shot toward the gap. The fragment filled the entire forward window. Maya made one final adjustment. They entered the gap. Metal walls rushed past on both sides so close that passengers could have reached out and touched them, if the hull had not been in the way. The ship was completely sideways, still matching the rotation of the fragment. For 3 seconds they were inside the debris, threading through the eye of a needle at high speed. Then they were through. Maya rolled the ship back to normal orientation and veered away from the fragment. Behind them it continued tumbling harmlessly into the void. The cabin erupted in shocked gasps and relieved sobs. Kyle let out a breath he had been holding. His hands were shaking. That was Maya said and paused. That was closer than I would have liked. She allowed herself a small smile. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were still steady. The debris field was starting to thin out now. The worst was behind them. Maya made a few more evasive maneuvers, but nothing as extreme as before. After another 10 minutes, the fragments became sparse. After 15 minutes, they were clear. We are through, Maya announced over the intercom. The debris field is behind us. You can relax now. The passengers erupted in applause. Some were crying. Others were laughing with relief. A few were still too shocked to react at all. Brandon sat perfectly still. He had come within seconds of death multiple times in the last 45 minutes, and he had been saved by someone he had treated like garbage. In the cockpit, Maya unbuckled her harness and stood up. Kyle stood too and extended his hand. She shook it. That was the best flying I have ever seen, he said. Thank you, Commander. You saved all of us. Just doing what I was trained to do, Maya said quietly. But she could not deny the feeling rushing through her, the satisfaction of a job well done, the pride of knowing she still had the skills. And underneath it all, a question she had been avoiding for 6 months. Maybe she was not done flying after all. The rest of the flight to Mars was quiet and uneventful. Maya remained in the cockpit with Kyle helping to monitor systems and ensure everything stayed stable. The passengers slowly calmed down, though many of them kept glancing toward the cockpit door as if checking to make sure their savior was still there. Brandon sat in his seat, staring at nothing. Greg had tried to talk to him a few times, but Brandon barely responded. He was lost in his own thoughts, replaying everything that had happened. Every cruel word he had spoken, every dismissive gesture, the way he had laughed at his own joke about the cleaning lady flying the plane. She had not just flown the plane, she had performed miracles. When the Celestial Dream finally approached Mars Orbital Station 6 hours later, the passengers were informed that emergency crews would be waiting for them. Word of the crisis had traveled ahead and news crews were already gathering at the arrival gates. Maya helped Kyle bring the ship in for a smooth landing at the station's docking bay. When the engines powered down, she sat back in the pilot seat and closed her eyes for a moment. She was exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. Flying through the debris field had brought back memories, good ones and bad ones. Kyle stood and saluted her even though she was no longer in the military. "You are a legend, Commander," he said. "It was an honor to fly with you." Maya smiled tiredly. "You did good work today, Lieutenant. You kept your head when everything went wrong. That is what matters." They exited the cockpit together and walked into the passenger cabin. Everyone stood up when Maya appeared. The applause started immediately. People were clapping and some were openly crying. A woman rushed forward and hugged Maya, thanking her over and over for saving her children. Maya accepted the thanks graciously, but she looked uncomfortable with all the attention. This was why she had wanted to be invisible. She did not want to be a hero anymore. She just wanted to be a person. Brandon watched from his seat. He wanted to approach her, to apologize properly. But there were too many people around her and he did not know what to say. How do you apologize for something like what he had done? Sorry seemed completely inadequate. The passengers began disembarking. Station security and medical teams came aboard to check on everyone and to take statements about what had happened. Kyle was escorted away to give his report to the flight authority. Maya was also asked to come with the officials. As she walked past Brandon, their eyes met for just a moment. He opened his mouth to say something, but she was already past him, moving down the aisle with the security team. Greg stood up and put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. "Come on," he said. "We need to get off the ship." They exited into the arrival terminal where chaos was waiting. News crews with cameras, station officials asking questions, passengers reuniting with family members who had heard about the crisis and rushed to the station. Brandon moved through it all like a ghost. Reporters tried to ask him questions, but Greg ran interference and kept them away. They made it to a quiet corner of the terminal where Brandon finally stopped and leaned against the wall. "I need to talk to her," he said. Greg nodded. "Yes, you do, but maybe give her some space first. She has been through a lot today." Brandon watched across the terminal where Maya was giving a statement to a cluster of officials. She looked tired but composed. Professional. Even in her cleaning uniform, she carried herself with dignity that made everyone around her stand a little straighter. A reporter managed to get close enough to ask, "Maya, a question?" The reporter's voice carried across the terminal. "Commander Johnson, is it true you have been working as a cleaner since retiring from the military?" Maya nodded. "Yes, that is correct. Why would someone with your credentials take such a position?" Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because honest work is honest work. It does not matter what job you do. What matters is that you do it with dignity and respect for yourself and others." The reporter scribbled notes. "And what do you say to the reports that a passenger mocked you before you saved everyone on the ship?" Brandon felt his stomach drop. Someone had talked. Of course someone had talked. Multiple passengers had witnessed his behavior. Maya's expression did not change. "I would say that people sometimes make mistakes," she said. "What matters is whether they learn from them." She ended the interview and walked away from the reporters. Brandon watched her disappear into a side corridor with the officials. "We are leaving," Greg said. "You have a hotel reservation and you need rest." "I need to apologize," Brandon said. "You will," Greg said, "but not today. Let her breathe." They took a transport to Brandon's hotel. It was one of the finest on Mars, with a suite overlooking the massive dome covering the city. But Brandon barely noticed the view. He stood at the window staring out at the red landscape beyond the dome and thinking about everything that had happened. His phone was buzzing constantly. Messages from business partners, friends who had seen the news, his public relations team asking how he wanted to handle the story. Brandon ignored all of it. That night he could not sleep. He kept replaying the flight in his mind, the way the ship had rolled and dived, the debris rushing past. The moment they had threaded through that impossible gap, and Maya's calm voice on the intercom telling everyone it would be okay. She had saved him, not just physically, but in a way he was only beginning to understand. She had shown him something about himself that he had been avoiding for years. That his wealth and success had turned him into someone cruel, someone who looked down on others, someone he did not want to be. The next morning, Brandon woke early. He showered and dressed and tried to figure out what to do. Greg came to his suite with coffee and a tablet showing the morning news. You are all over the media, Greg said. Most of the coverage is about Commander Johnson and her heroic flying. But there are some stories about a wealthy passenger who insulted her before the crisis. Brandon took the tablet and read. The stories were not kind. Social media was already digging into his background, finding other examples of him being dismissive to service workers. A video from 2 years ago showed him berating a waiter at a restaurant. Another clip showed him walking past a homeless veteran without even glancing down. He looked like exactly what he was. A rich man who thought other people existed to serve him. I need to make this right, Brandon said. How, Greg asked. You cannot just throw money at this. This is not that kind of problem. Brandon knew he was right. Money could fix a lot of things, but it could not fix this. He needed to actually change, to actually become better. He spent the day trying to figure out how to reach Maya. The station authorities would not give out her contact information. The hotel she was staying at would not confirm if she was even there. She had effectively disappeared. 2 days passed. Brandon's business meetings happened, but he could barely focus on them. He was supposed to be celebrating his big contract, but all he could think about was finding Maya and apologizing properly. On the 3rd day, Greg came to him with news. I found her, Greg said. She is volunteering at a veterans center in the Dome's south sector. One of my contacts saw her there this morning. Brandon immediately headed for the center. It was a modest building that provided support and resources for former military personnel. Inside, veterans were attending classes learning skills to help them transition to civilian life. Others were meeting with counselors or just socializing with people who understood what they had been through. Brandon found Maya in a large room helping to set up chairs for a group session. She was wearing casual clothes instead of her uniform. She looked up when he entered and her expression became neutral. Hello, Brandon, she said. I wondered when you would find me. Brandon walked over slowly. His prepared speech evaporated from his mind. Standing in front of her, he could not remember any of the careful words he had rehearsed. I am sorry, he said. It was all he could manage. Maya set down the chair she was holding. I know you are, she said. Not just for what I said on the ship, Brandon continued. For everything. For the way I have treated people my whole life. You were right. I tried to humiliate you because I thought you were beneath me. And I was wrong. Maya studied him quietly. Why are you really here, she asked. Is this about your public image? Damage control. Brandon shook his head. No. I mean, yes, my team wants me to do damage control, but that is not why I am here. I am here because you saved my life and I treated you terribly, and I need you to know that I understand how wrong I was. Understanding is a start, Maya said, but it is just a start. She walked past him toward the door, then stopped and turned back. If you really want to make things right, she said, then I have a challenge for you. Brandon looked up. Anything he said? Maya smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to make a point. Come with me, she said. We need to talk. Maya led Brandon to a small coffee shop near the Veterans Center. It was a quiet place with simple furniture and a view of one of the Dome's gardens. They sat at a table in the corner away from other customers. Brandon ordered coffee he did not want just to have something to do with his hands. You said you have a challenge for me, Brandon said after they sat down. Maya nodded. She wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup and looked at him directly. Your behavior on the ship was not an isolated incident, she said. I have been watching the news. People are coming forward with stories about how you have treated service workers over the years. The waiter you berated, the security guard you ignored, the cleaning staff at your office who you never even bothered to learn the names of. Brandon felt his face grow hot. He wanted to defend himself, but he knew she was right. You are not a bad person, Maya continued, but you have let your wealth create a barrier between you and the rest of humanity. You have forgotten that the people who serve you are just as human as you are, just as valuable, just as deserving of respect, I know, Brandon said quietly. You are right, knowing is not enough, Maya said. Anyone can say they know better after they get caught. What matters is whether you actually change. She leaned forward. So here is my challenge. You will spend 1 month working as part of the service crew here on Mars Station. Cleaning, maintenance, food service. Whatever jobs they need filled. You will do the work that you look down on. You will experience what it feels like to be invisible to people who think their money makes them better than you. Brandon stared at her. A month, he said. 1 month, Maya confirmed. You will work full shifts. You will live on a service worker's salary. No using your wealth to make it easier. No pulling strings or calling in favors. You work like everyone else works. And if I do this, Brandon asked, then I will have dinner with you, Maya said. One dinner where we can talk as equals. No promises beyond that. No guarantees. Just a conversation, and if I refuse, Brandon said. Maya's expression hardened. Then I go to the media with the full story, including security footage from the ship. Your public relations team might have been able to contain the damage so far, but I can make it much worse. Your reputation will be destroyed. Brandon sat back. That is blackmail, he said. No, Maya said. That is consequences. You want forgiveness. You want to feel better about yourself, fine, but you have to earn it. Words are easy. Let's see if you can actually do the work. Brandon's mind was racing. A month of manual labor, living on barely any money, being treated the way he had treated others. Every instinct told him to refuse, to call her bluff, to use his lawyers and his money to make this problem go away. But another part of him knew that was exactly what the old Brandon would do. And the old Brandon was the person who had mocked a decorated war hero because she was wearing a cleaning uniform. He looked at Maya and saw that she was serious. This was not a negotiation. It was a test. I will do it, he said. Maya raised her eyebrows. Just like that. Just like that, Brandon confirmed. You are right. I need to understand what I have been doing to people. And apparently the only way I will understand is by experiencing it myself. Maya studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I will make the arrangements. You start tomorrow. Tomorrow, Brandon repeated. His business meetings. His contracts, figure it out, Maya said. That is part of the challenge. She stood up. Be at the station's maintenance office at 6 in the morning. They will give you your assignment and your uniform. Brandon stood as well. Maya, he said. Why are you doing this? You could just walk away and never think about me again. Maya paused. Because I have seen what war does to people, she said quietly. I have seen good people become monsters and monsters become heroes. Everyone is capable of change. The question is whether they are willing to do the hard work required. She walked toward the door, then looked back one more time. And because you made me a promise on the ship, she said with a slight smile. Something about marriage. If I could fly us to Mars, I am not interested in marriage. But I am interested in seeing if you are worth having dinner with. Then she was gone, leaving Brandon standing alone in the coffee shop. He called Greg and explained the situation. Greg was quiet for a long time. You are actually going to do this? Greg asked. I have to, Brandon said. She is right. I need to change. Your business partners are not going to like this, Greg warned. You have meetings scheduled. Contracts to finalize. Cancel them, Brandon said. Or postpone them. I do not care. This is more important. Greg sighed. Okay, I will handle the business side. You focus on not getting fired from your new job. That night, Brandon barely slept. He kept thinking about what the next month would be like. He had never done manual labor in his life. He had grown up wealthy and had never needed to work a service job. Even his first business had been funded by his family's money. The next morning, he arrived at the maintenance office at 5:45. A tired-looking supervisor named Carl was waiting for him with a gray uniform identical to the one Maya had been wearing when Brandon first saw her. So you are the rich guy who wants to play janitor for a month, Carl said. I am here to work, Brandon said, trying to sound confident. We will see about that, Carl said. He handed Brandon the uniform and pointed to a changing room. Get dressed. You start in 15 minutes. Brandon changed into the uniform. It was plain and functional and felt strange against his skin. He was used to expensive tailored clothes. This was just basic gray fabric with his name stitched on the chest. When he emerged, Carl looked him over. You will be working with the cleaning crew for your first week, he said. Bathrooms, floors, waste disposal. Think you can handle that? Yes, sir, Brandon said. Carl almost smiled. Sir. That is cute. Nobody calls me Sir Kid. It is just Carl. He led Brandon through the station to meet the rest of the cleaning crew. There were 5 others. A woman named Linda who had been doing this for 15 years. A young man named Danny who was saving money for flight school. An older man named Peter who had retired from another career and taken this job to stay active. And 2 others whose names Brandon tried hard to remember. They all looked at Brandon with suspicion. Word had spread about who he was and why he was there. Linda handed him a mop and bucket. You are on bathroom duty, she said. 3rd-level public restrooms. All of them. Brandon took the equipment. How many restrooms are there? He asked. 24, Linda said. You better get started. The first bathroom was a wake-up call. It was dirty in ways Brandon had never had to think about before. He cleaned toilets and sinks and floors. His back started hurting after the first hour. His hands got raw from the cleaning chemicals. People came and went, completely ignoring him. He was invisible to them, just like service workers had been invisible to him his whole life. Businessmen in expensive suits walked past without even glancing at him. Tourists complained about having to wait while he cleaned. One man actually pushed past him, making Brandon drop his mop. The man did not apologize, did not even acknowledge that Brandon existed. Brandon picked up the mop and kept working. By lunchtime, he had cleaned 8 bathrooms. His entire body ached. He sat in the crew break room eating a basic sandwich from the station cafeteria. The other crew members sat at a different table talking and laughing among themselves. Nobody invited Brandon to join them. Danny eventually came over. How you holding up, he asked. Tired, Brandon admitted. I did not realize how hard this work is. Danny shrugged. You get used to it. The physical part anyway. The way people treat you like you are invisible, that never really gets easier. Brandon nodded. I am starting to understand that. Danny studied him. Look, I know who you are and I know why you are here. The whole crew knows. And I will be honest, most of us think you are just doing this for publicity, that you will quit after a few days and go back to your comfortable life. Maybe, Brandon said. Or maybe I will actually learn something. We will see, Danny said. But for what it is worth, I hope you stick it out. People like you need to understand what it is like for people like us. The afternoon was more of the same. More bathrooms, more being invisible, more physical exhaustion. By the time Brandon's shift ended at 6 in the evening, he could barely walk. Every muscle hurt. His hands were blistered. He smelled like cleaning chemicals and sweat. Carl checked his work and grunted. Not bad for a first day. You did not quit. That is something. Brandon dragged himself to the small efficiency apartment the station had assigned to service workers. It was tiny, just a bed, a small bathroom, and a kitchenette. Nothing like the luxury hotel suite he had been staying in. He collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. One day down, he thought. 29 to go. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, just one sentence. How was your first day? Brandon typed back. Hard, but I am not quitting. There was a pause, then another message appeared. Good. See, you around the station? Brandon smiled despite his exhaustion. Then he closed his eyes and fell asleep, still wearing his uniform. The first week was the hardest. Brandon's body was not used to physical labor, and every morning he woke up sore and exhausted. His hands developed calluses. His back ached constantly. He learned which cleaning chemicals worked best on which surfaces. He learned how to mop efficiently and how to clean a bathroom in under 15 minutes. But the physical work was not the worst part. The worst part was the way people treated him. Passengers and station workers walked past him like he was furniture. They left messes and expected him to clean them up without complaint. Once a businessman dropped his coffee cup right in front of Brandon and just kept walking. Brandon had to stop what he was doing and clean up the spill. He wanted to say something, to tell the man that was rude, but he remembered how many times he had probably done the same thing to other service workers, without even thinking about it, so he cleaned up the coffee and said nothing. Linda noticed his frustration during a break. Welcome to our world, she said. People do not see us. We are just part of the background to them. How do you deal with it? Brandon asked. Linda shrugged. You remember that you are more than your job. You are a person with dreams and family and a life that matters. What these people think of you does not define who you are. Brandon thought about that a lot over the following days. In the second week, he was transferred to food service. He worked in one of the station cafeterias serving meals to workers and passengers. The work was fast-paced and demanding. The kitchen was hot. The customers were often impatient. He worked alongside a woman named Susan who had been doing this job for 8 years. She was quick and efficient and never seemed to get flustered no matter how busy it got. During a rare, quiet moment, Brandon asked her why she stayed in this job. I have 2 kids back on Earth, Susan said. I send most of my salary home to my sister who takes care of them. Working here pays better than I could make anywhere else with my education level. In 3 more years, I will have saved enough to bring them to Mars and start a better life. Brandon had never thought about the stories behind the people who served him food. He had never asked. He had just assumed they were doing simple work because they were simple people. But Susan was not simple. She was a mother making sacrifices for her children. She was smart and hardworking, and doing everything she could to build a better future. That night, Brandon lay in his small apartment thinking about Susan and Linda and Danny and all the other people he had met. Each one had a story. Each one had dreams and struggles and lives that were just as complex and important as his own. He had never seen that before because he had never bothered to look in. The third week, Maya started showing up at the station during his shifts. She never approached him directly. She would just be there in the background volunteering at the Veterans Center or helping with community projects. Sometimes their eyes would meet across her room and she would give him a small nod. He knew she was checking on him, making sure he was actually doing the work, making sure he was not cheating or using his wealth to make things easier. He was not. He had moved out of his luxury hotel. He was living in the service worker housing. He was eating in the cafeteria with everyone else. His business partners were furious, but Greg was handling them. Brandon was too busy to care. He worked, he slept, he worked some more. One day he was mopping the floor near the Veterans Center when he heard voices. A group of veterans were having a session about transitioning to civilian work. Maya was leading the discussion. The hardest part is not the job skills, she was saying. Most of you have skills that transfer well to civilian work. The hardest part is adjusting to a world where people do not understand what you have been through, where your service does not mean anything to most civilians, where you are invisible. Brandon stopped mopping and listened. One veteran spoke up. I saved lives in the war. I was decorated. I was important. Now I work loading cargo and nobody even knows my name. Your service still matters, Maya said gently. Just because civilians do not see it does not mean it was not real. You know what you did. Your fellow veterans know. That has to be enough, but what if it is not enough, someone else asked. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then you find new purpose, she said. You find ways to help others. You remember that your value as a person is not determined by whether other people recognize you or respect you. It comes from inside. Brandon felt those words hit him hard. His whole life he had based his worth on external things, money, success, recognition. He had needed other people to see him as important. But these veterans had done extraordinary things, and most civilians never acknowledged it. They kept going anyway. They found dignity in honest work even when that work was invisible to others. That was real strength. In the fourth week, Brandon was assigned to maintenance work. He repaired ventilation systems and fixed broken equipment and dealt with waste management. It was dirty and often disgusting work. He was working on a clogged drain when Peter, the older man from the cleaning crew, came to help him. This is the worst job on the station, Peter said cheerfully. If you can handle this, you can handle anything. They worked together in silence for a while. Then Peter said, you are doing better than I expected. Thanks, Brandon said. I think. No, I mean it, Peter said. Most rich guys would have quit by now. But you are actually trying. The crew has noticed. Brandon felt something warm in his chest. Acceptance. Maybe even respect. Why did you retire and take this job? Brandon asked. If you do not mind me asking, Peter smiled. I was an engineer. Made good money. But when I retired, I realized I did not want to just sit around. I wanted to stay active. Stay useful. This job keeps me moving and lets me help keep the station running. That is enough for me. Do people treat you differently now? Brandon asked. Now that you are doing this work instead of engineering. Of course, Peter said. But I know who I am. That is what matters. Brandon nodded slowly. He was starting to understand that. Starting to internalize it. His identity was not his wealth or his job title. It was how he treated people. How he acted when nobody was watching. Whether he had the strength to do hard work without needing recognition for it. By the end of the fourth week, Brandon had changed in ways he could not fully explain. He was leaner from the physical work. His hands were rough. He moved differently, carried himself differently, but the biggest changes were internal. He noticed things now. The tired eyes of a single mother working double shifts, the quiet pride of a veteran mopping floors, the small kindnesses people showed each other when they thought nobody important was watching. He had spent his whole life climbing above other people, trying to be better than them. Now he was learning to be among them, to be part of the community of people who did the work that kept the world running. One evening he was leaving his shift when he ran into Maya outside the cafeteria. She was carrying supplies for the Veterans Center. "Let me help," Brandon said, reaching for some of the boxes. Maya hesitated, then handed him a box. They walked together in silence. "You have 2 weeks left," Maya said. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," Brandon admitted. "It is hard work, but I am learning a lot." "What have you learned?" Maya asked. Brandon thought about it. "That I was wrong about almost everything," he said. "That the people I looked down on are often stronger and better than I ever was. That honest work has dignity regardless of what the work is. That being invisible to others does not mean you are invisible to yourself." Maya stopped walking and looked at him. "Those are good lessons," she said quietly. "I still have a long way to go," Brandon said. "But I am trying," I can see that, Maya said. "The crew talks about you. They say you work hard, that you do not complain, that you actually listen when people talk to you now." "I wish I had learned to listen years ago," Brandon said.
"I wasted a lot of time being someone I am not proud of. The past is past," Maya said.
"What matters is who you choose to be now." They reached the Veterans Center and unloaded the supplies. Maya thanked him and turned to go inside, but Brandon stopped her. "Maya," he said. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For giving me this chance," Brandon said. "You could have just destroyed my reputation and walked away. Instead, you offered me a chance to become better." "I will never forget that," Maya smiled. "You are welcome. Now go get some rest. You have another shift tomorrow." Brandon walked back to his small apartment. He was exhausted, but he felt good. Better than he had felt in years. 2 more weeks, he thought. 2 more weeks and then dinner with Maya. If he was being honest with himself, he was not doing this for the dinner anymore. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. Because he needed to change. Because he wanted to be someone better. But he was still looking forward to that dinner. The final 2 weeks went faster than Brandon expected. He had settled into the rhythm of the work. His body no longer ached as much. His hands were calloused but steady. He knew the names of everyone on the crew and they knew his. More importantly, they trusted him now. They shared their breaks with him, invited him to their conversations, told him their stories. Linda talked about her grandchildren back on Earth and how she video called them every Sunday. Danny shared his dreams of becoming a commercial pilot someday. Peter showed him pictures from his engineering days and talked about the projects he was most proud of. Susan from the cafeteria introduced Brandon to her sister over video call and let him see her kids. They were 7 and 9 years old, bright-eyed and full of energy. Susan worked 16-hour days sometimes so those kids could have a better life. Brandon started to understand wealth in a different way. He had always measured it in money and possessions. But these people had wealth too. Wealth in relationships, in purpose, in the knowledge that they were doing important work even if nobody thanked them for it. During his 5th week, Brandon was working in the cargo bay helping to unload supply ships. It was heavy physical labor that required teamwork and coordination. He was paired with a veteran named Jack who had lost his left arm in the war and now used a prosthetic. Jack moved the heavy containers with ease despite his injury. He caught Brandon staring at the prosthetic arm once and grinned. "Military grade," he said. "Better than the original in some ways." "Does it hurt?" Brandon asked, then immediately regretted the question. "Sorry, that is probably too personal." "It is fine," Jack said. "And no, it does not hurt. Not physically, anyway. But sometimes I still feel like my real arm is there. Phantom sensations. The brain is weird like that." They worked in silence for a while. Then Jack said, "You are the guy from the news, right? The one who insulted Commander Johnson?" Brandon nodded. "Yeah, that was me." "And now you are here doing this?" Jack said. Why, Brandon set down the container he was carrying. "Because she gave me a choice," he said. "Either learn what it means to be invisible, or have my reputation destroyed." "I chose to learn, and have you?" Jack asked. "Learned more than I thought possible," Brandon said. "I spent my whole life thinking I was better than people who did this kind of work. Now I know I was just ignorant." Jack nodded slowly. "Commander Johnson is good at teaching hard lessons," he said. "She did the same thing for a lot of us in the military. Made us question our assumptions. Made us better." "Did you serve with her?" Brandon asked. "Different unit," Jack said. "But I saw her in action during the Proxima conflict. She saved my transport ship once. We were dead in the water and enemy fighters were closing in. She flew her Corvette right through their formation, taking hits to draw them away from us. She took down 3 fighters before reinforcements arrived. That woman is fearless." Brandon felt a surge of respect that went even deeper than before. Maya had not just saved his life on the Celestial Dream, she had saved countless lives during the war. And afterwards she had quietly taken a cleaning job because she needed peace. He had mocked her, called her sweetheart, laughed about her flying a plane. The shame still burned, but it was different now. Before it had been shame at being caught. Now it was genuine regret for hurting, someone who deserved only respect. That evening, Brandon was finishing his shift when Carl called him into the maintenance office. "Sit down, Carl," said. Brandon sat wondering if something was wrong. Carl leaned back in his chair and studied Brandon for a long moment. "When you first showed up here, I thought you were a joke," he said. "Some rich kid playing pretend for a few days before running back to your comfortable life." Brandon said nothing, waiting. "But you stuck it out," Carl continued. "You worked hard. You did not complain. You treated the crew with respect, and they have come to respect you back." "Thank you," Brandon said. "I am not done," Carl said. "The crew took a vote yesterday. They want to know if you would be interested in staying on after your month is up." Brandon blinked. "What?" "Not full-time," Carl clarified. "We know you have your business to run, but maybe a few shifts a month. The crew says you have become one of them. They would like you to stay part of the team." Brandon felt emotion tighten his throat. He had not expected this, had not even considered it. "I would like that," he said. "I would really like that." Carl nodded. "Good. Now get out of here. Your month ends in 3 days, and I am sure you have plans." Brandon left the office in a daze. The crew wanted him to stay. They saw him as one of them now. It meant more to him than any business deal ever had. The next 2 days passed quickly. Brandon worked his shifts, said goodbye to passengers he would never see again, cleaned bathrooms and served food and hauled cargo. On his last day, the crew threw him a small party during lunch break. They gave him a card that everyone had signed. Linda hugged him. Danny shook his hand. Peter clapped him on the back. "You did good, kid," Carl said. "Really good." Susan handed him a small wrapped package. "Open it later," she said. Brandon promised he would. When his final shift ended, he changed out of his uniform slowly. He folded it carefully and left it in his locker. He had the option to keep it, but he wanted to leave it here. It belonged to the station, to the next person who would need it. He walked out of the maintenance office and found Maya waiting for him outside. She was dressed nicely. Not fancy, but nicer than her usual casual clothes. She smiled when she saw him. "Ready for that dinner?" she asked. "More than ready," Brandon said. They took a transport to a restaurant overlooking one of the dome's gardens. It was not the fanciest restaurant on Mars, but it was warm and comfortable with good food and quiet atmosphere. They sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither spoke. So Maya said finally, "You made it through the whole month." "I did," Brandon said, "and I am glad I did." "Tell me what you learned," Maya said. Brandon thought about where to start. "I learned that I was wrong about almost everything," he said. "I thought success meant being better than other people, being above them. But real success is being part of something larger than yourself. It is treating people with dignity, regardless of their job or status. It is finding value in honest work and in the community you build with others." He paused. "I also learned that I wasted a lot of years being someone I do not like very much." "We all have regrets," Maya said gently. "What matters is what we do next." "What are you doing next?" Brandon asked. "Are you going back to flying?" Maya nodded. "I am starting a training academy for veterans transitioning to civilian piloting work. A lot of military pilots struggle to find jobs when they leave service. I want to help them." "That is amazing," Brandon said. "How can I help?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Help how?" Brandon leaned forward. "I want to fund it. The academy. No strings attached. No publicity. Just let me help make it happen." "Why would you do that?" Maya asked. "Because it is important," Brandon said. "Because these people deserve support. And because I have more money than I know what to do with, and I want to use it for something that actually matters." Maya studied him. "This is not about trying to impress me, is it?" "No," Brandon said honestly. "I mean, yes, I want to impress you, but that is not why I am offering. I am offering because it is the right thing to do. I have spent my whole life making money for myself. I want to start using it to help others." Maya smiled. "Okay," she said. "Let's talk about it." They spent the next 2 hours talking. About the academy. About Brandon's plans to continue working part-time with the station crew. About Maya's struggles with adjusting to civilian life and how the Veterans Center was helping her. Brandon told her about Susan's kids and Danny's dreams and Jack's prosthetic arm. Maya told him about the nightmares she still had, sometimes, and how painting helped her process them. It was the most honest conversation Brandon had ever had with anyone. As the evening wound down, Maya said, "I have to admit, I did not think you would make it. Through the month, I almost did not," Brandon admitted. "The first week I wanted to quit every single day." "What stopped you?" Maya asked. "You did," Brandon said. "You believed I could change. Or at least you believed enough to give me the chance. I did not want to let you down." "You did not let me down," Maya said. "You surprised me. That does not happen often." They walked out of the restaurant together. The dome's artificial sky was showing stars. Brandon looked up at them and thought about the debris field, about how close they had all come to dying, about how Maya had saved them all. "Can I see you again?" Brandon asked, not as part of a challenge or a test. Just as friends, Maya considered this. "Yes," she said. "I think I would like that." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Brandon said the thing he had been thinking about for weeks. "I know I said I would marry you if you could fly the ship," he said. "Obviously I was being cruel and mocking when I said it. But if I could take it back and say something different, I would say thank you. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for teaching me to be better. Thank you for giving me a second chance." Maya stopped walking and looked at him. "You are welcome," she said. "And for what it is worth, you have changed. I can see it. Everyone can see it." "I still have a long way to go," Brandon said. "We all do," Maya said. "But you are on the right path now." They reached the transport station and Maya turned to say goodbye, but Brandon stopped her. "One more thing," he said. "That package Susan gave me. Can I open it now?" "Go ahead," Maya said, curious. Brandon pulled out the small package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a photo. 3 months had passed since Brandon completed his challenge. He stood in front of a new building in the Mars Dome, looking up at the sign that read, Veterans Flight Academy. The building was modest but well equipped with simulation rooms and classrooms and even a small hangar for training vessels. Maya stood beside him holding a tablet with the final inspection reports. Everything had passed. "They could open next week. This is really happening," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. Brandon smiled. "You made it happen. I just provided the funding. It was more than that," Maya said. "You helped design the program. You interviewed instructors. You have been here almost every day making sure everything was perfect." It was true. After their dinner 3 months ago, Brandon had thrown himself into the Academy project. He had worked with Maya to create a training program that would help military pilots transition to civilian work. They had hired experienced instructors. They had acquired ships and simulators. They had even set up a job placement program with commercial flight companies. But Brandon had also kept his promise to the station maintenance crew. Twice a week he put on his gray uniform and worked shifts with Carl and Linda and the others. He cleaned and repaired and served food. And he loved it. His business partners had been confused at first. Some had been angry. But Brandon had restructured his company to give his assistant Greg more authority. Greg was smart and capable, and the business ran smoothly without Brandon micromanaging everything. This freed Brandon to focus on what he had discovered actually mattered to him: people, community, making a real difference in individual lives. The academy already had 30 students enrolled for the first semester. All of them were veterans. All of them were looking for a new path after military service. Brandon had met several of them over the past few weeks and had been amazed by their stories. There was Claire, who had piloted reconnaissance drones during the war and now wanted to fly commercial cargo ships. There was Marcus, who had been a fighter pilot and dreamed of doing rescue operations. There was Angela, who had navigated supply convoys through hostile territory and wanted to teach others what she had learned. Each one had sacrificed for humanity. Each one deserved a chance to build a new life. Maya's tablet pinged with a message. She checked it and smiled. "The ships just arrived," she said. "Want to go see them?" They walked to the small hangar where 3 training vessels were being unloaded. They were not military ships, but they were solid, reliable craft perfect for teaching civilian flight operations. Maya ran her hand along the hull of the nearest ship. Her expression was distant, as if remembering something. "You miss it," Brandon said. "Military flying?" Maya nodded. "Sometimes, not the combat, not the fear, but the purpose, the feeling that what I was doing mattered." "It did matter," Brandon said. You saved countless lives. Including mine, I know, Maya said. But out here in civilian life it is different. You have to find new ways to matter. And you have, Brandon said, gesturing around the hangar. This academy will change lives. You are still saving people, just in a different way. Maya looked at him and smiled. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, Brandon said. They walked through the facility checking on final preparations. The classrooms were ready. The simulators were programmed. The student housing was prepared. Everything was in place. That evening, Maya invited Brandon to the Veterans Center for a celebration. The students who would be attending the academy were there along with other veterans and volunteers. It was a casual gathering with food and music and conversation. Brandon found himself talking with Marcus, the former fighter pilot. Marcus was excited about the academy but also nervous. I have been a military pilot my whole adult life, he said. I do not know how to be anything else. You will figure it out, Brandon said. And you will have support. That is what the academy is for. Were you military? Marcus asked. No, Brandon said. I was a businessman. Still am, actually. But I have learned a lot about service recently. He told Marcus about his month working with the station crew. About cleaning bathrooms and serving food and hauling cargo. About learning to be invisible and finding dignity in that invisibility. Marcus listened with interest. So you chose to do that, he said. Nobody made you, someone made me, Brandon admitted. Commander Johnson. She gave me a choice between learning humility or losing everything. I chose to learn. Smart choice, Marcus said. Best decision I ever made, Brandon said. Later in the evening, Maya called for everyone's attention. She stood in the center of the room holding a glass. I want to thank everyone for being here, she said. This academy represents something important. A second chance. A new beginning. All of you served humanity with courage and dedication. Now you get to choose your own path forward. She paused. I also want to thank Brandon Cole, who made this possible. Many of you know the story of how we met. How he mocked me and how I challenged him to change. What you might not know is that he actually did it. He spent a month working jobs he had looked down on his whole life. He learned to see people instead of just walking past them, and he has become someone I am proud to call a friend. People clapped. Brandon felt his face grow warm, but he smiled and raised his glass in acknowledgement. Maya continued. This academy is not just about teaching you to fly civilian ships. It is about helping you find community and purpose in a world that often does not understand what you have been through. You are not alone here. We are all in this together. More applause. People raised their glasses. Someone started playing music and the party resumed. Brandon found himself talking with veterans throughout the evening. Each one had a story. Each one had survived things Brandon could barely imagine, and each one was looking forward with hope. Near the end of the evening, Maya pulled Brandon aside. Walk with me, she said. They stepped outside into the dome's garden area. The artificial sky was showing Earth in the distance. A small blue marble against the black. I have been thinking, Maya said, about what comes next for me. Tell me, Brandon said. The academy will keep me busy, she said. But I think I want to fly again, too. Not military, not combat, but I miss being in the cockpit. What kind of flying? Brandon asked. Maya smiled. I have been talking to some people about doing rescue operations. There are always emergencies in space. Ships that break down. Stations that need help. Medical evacuations. Dangerous work, but important. That sounds perfect for you, Brandon said. I think so too, Maya said. I spent 12 years fighting. Maybe I can spend the next 12 years saving people in a different way. You already saved people, Brandon said. Look at what you did for me, Maya laughed. You saved yourself. I just pointed you in the right direction. They walked in silence for a while. Then Brandon said something he had been thinking about for weeks. I want to.